My husband asked for a divorce right after my father's funeral. I thought it was grief. Then I found a copy of the obituary in his safe, with my father's face circled and a sticky note that said, "It's done." Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's all be internet friends. They lowered the casket while Matt gripped my hand so tight I lost feeling in 2 fingers. His other hand clutched a crumpled tissue, shredded from being twisted in his palm. He was crying. Not a single stoic tear, full body trembling, gulping sobs, loud enough that people turned to look. My cousin Ava whispered behind me, "God, he adored your dad." Someone murmured back, "He's the rock in all this." I couldn't speak, couldn't even pretend. I just stared at the box going into the ground and thought, stupidly, that I'd forgotten to bring gloves. My fingers were raw. The wind cut through the black wool coat I'd worn to every funeral for the past 10 years. Matt gave the eulogy, said all the right things. He started with a joke, a safe, charming one about how my dad used to mix up song lyrics and sing them loud enough to make strangers stare. Everyone chuckled. He slipped into reverence next, talking about how my father had been like a second dad to him, how he taught him more than his own father ever did. "Integrity," Matt said, voice shaking just enough. That was James Wallace. Integrity and impossible expectations. People loved that line, laughed again. Someone behind me sniffled hard. I couldn't turn to see who. Matt ended it with, "He gave me the best thing he ever made," and looked down at me like I was glass, like he could see every fracture line forming under the weight of that day. Everyone clapped, the way people do at funerals now. Quiet, respectful applause like grief had become a performance, and they were grateful for the show. We stood together afterward, his arm tight around my waist, guiding me through the condolences. I heard things like, "You were so lucky to have him, and he was so proud of you," and Matt, that speech, wow. Strangers gripped our hands. Family pulled us in for long, teary hugs. I didn't really register much of it. Just images. My aunt's red lipstick smudged on a tissue. The priest's watch glinting in the sun. The grave worker, bored out of his mind, yawning just before the casket touched earth. Matt never let go of me. He kept touching my back, kissing my temple, tucking my hair behind my ear. Grief carved a raw place inside me, but he filled it in with presence. Noise, soft murmurs of, "I've got you, and we'll get through this." It felt like the one solid thing left. That night he poured 2 glasses of wine and turned off all the lights in the house. Just candles. Said my dad hated overhead lighting. He was right, so we'd honor that. We sat on the living room floor. He let me cry. Didn't say much, just held my feet in his lap and rubbed them like I was a fragile animal that might bolt if he let go. I remember thinking, "God, how lucky I am to have this man." He kissed my knee, told me to sleep, said he'd handle the calls tomorrow. The insurance, the thank you notes. He tucked me into bed like a child and went downstairs, said he couldn't sleep, wanted to clean up, wanted to stay close to the photos we'd put out for the memorial. When I woke up the next morning, he was already dressed. Cooking eggs, making coffee, moving too fast for someone who was grieving, I chalked it up to adrenaline. "You should rest," I murmured. He leaned down and kissed me. "You need me." "So I'm here." He didn't eat the eggs, just pushed them around the plate and asked if I wanted to go through my dad's office that week or wait. I told him I couldn't yet. He said, "Then we won't. Whatever you need." That was the last time he looked at me like that. We met at a friend's engagement party. One of those nights where everyone's overdressed and overstimulated, trying too hard to pretend they aren't panicking about turning 30. Matt stood by the bar, drinking something dark in a glass too clean to be cheap. I remember he had this unbothered stillness to him, like the rest of the world could wait. He didn't try to impress me, just asked if I hated these things as much as he did. I said yes. He said, "Then let's leave." I didn't, but I took his number. We were official within 2 months, lived together in 6, married by year 3. My friends said it was fast, but it didn't feel that way. Matt was reliable, warm in a quiet way. He noticed when I was low, bought my favorite snacks without asking, washed my car when he borrowed it, never forgot birthdays, called my mother once a week. My dad liked him, that meant something. They weren't close at first, but they respected each other. My father was the kind of man who measured worth in two categories, competence and loyalty. Matt passed on both. He was good with numbers, calm in a crisis, didn't drink too much, never raised his voice. They'd talk about work, sports, the housing market, nothing intimate. But when my dad opened a new office 2 years before he got sick, he offered Matt a job. Said he needed someone solid. I remember how proud Matt was. He acted casual about it, but I could see it in the way he checked his reflection twice before the first day. The way he over-ironed his shirt. We settled into married life like it was second nature. Holidays, Costco runs, mild arguments about closet space. Nothing cinematic, nothing dramatic, just real. There were no red flags. Or maybe there were, and I didn't see them because I didn't think I had to look. When my dad's health started slipping, Matt stepped up, drove him to appointments, managed paperwork. Said I didn't need to burn out, that's what partners were for. I told him once, "You're a good man." He pulled me in and murmured, "You make it easy." 12 years, that's how long we were together, 8 of them married. I thought that meant something. I thought that meant permanence. But the night after the funeral, he didn't come home. He didn't come home that night. I didn't panic. I figured he needed space. Everyone grieves differently. That's what people say, right? Grief doesn't have a shape. It just hits and rolls over you however it wants. He texted late, almost midnight. Said he was at a hotel. Needed time. I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. The message was short, clinical. Staying at the Waverly. Just need some air, don't wait up. No, love you. No, are you okay? I sat in our bedroom, still dressed from the service earlier that day. The bed was perfectly made, his pillow still dented. The tie he wore for the funeral, my dad's favorite navy and gray pattern, lay folded over the dresser. He hadn't even taken it with him. I called. He didn't pick up. 5 minutes later, he texted again. "I just need a night. I'm not okay." That part felt true. He hadn't been okay. But neither was I, and I was still here. Sitting in the dark. Trying not to fall apart in a house that still smelled like the sympathy lilies someone had delivered that morning. I opened the window, lit a candle, waited. He didn't come back the next morning either. I called again around 10, straight to voicemail. I pictured him curled up in a hotel robe, TV on mute, ignoring me on purpose, or asleep, or crying. By lunchtime, I drove to the Waverly myself. The front desk clerk was polite, tight-lipped, but confirmed he'd checked in. "Still registered as staying," she added, glancing at her monitor like she hoped I'd read her mind and leave it at that. I didn't ask to be let up. Just walked out and sat in the car, watching the revolving door in case he came out. He didn't. I drove home with both hands clenched on the wheel. Every song on the radio felt too loud, too stupid, too bright for how hollow my chest felt. I turned it off, drove in silence. By evening, I gave up and texted again. "Come home, please, I'm not okay either." 3 dots. Then nothing. At midnight, another message came in. "Tomorrow, we need to talk." He came back with divorce papers. No hug, no eye contact, just a manila envelope in one hand and his car keys in the other. He stood in the doorway like a courier delivering bad news that wasn't his to own. I didn't say anything, just stared at the envelope. It looked like it held receipts, or tax forms, something clinical. Boring, harmless. He dropped it on the kitchen island, slid it toward me. "I think we both know this hasn't been working." I laughed, a small, ridiculous sound. "Are you serious?" "I'm not in love anymore," he replied. Same tone he used when he canceled dinner plans or said we were out of milk. I waited for him to say something else. Anything else. Some explanation or confession or even anger. But he just stood there, like a stranger rehearsing lines he didn't believe. "This is grief," I muttered. "You're lashing out, you're not thinking straight." He shook his head. "This has nothing to do with your dad." I stepped closer. "You helped bury him 3 days ago." "I know." "You gave the eulogy." "I know." "You cried so hard you couldn't finish your wine that night." He nodded like he was agreeing to something in theory, but not in practice. "I've been thinking about this for a while." That hit me in the stomach, not a punch, a vacuum, an absence. "How long?" He didn't answer, just looked at the envelope like it could speak for him. "You don't even want to talk about it?" I asked, voice breaking. "There's nothing to talk about," he murmured. "It's time for both of us." I stood there for what felt like hours, my hands flat on the counter, my father's funeral program still sitting in the fruit bowl beside me, his face smiling up from beneath a photo of the lake house he built with his own hands. Matt turned to leave. I hadn't even asked where he was going. I just watched him walk out, didn't slam the door, didn't even close it fully. Just walked away like he hadn't spent 12 years learning every inch of my life. He didn't ask about the will, not once. He didn't ask who got the house or whether the bank accounts were frozen. He didn't mention the stocks, the trust, the insurance, nothing. As if my father's death had no financial dimension. As if a man who'd spent his whole life building something didn't leave behind a mountain of paperwork and value. Matt had worked at my father's firm for years. He knew exactly what was there, what my dad owned, what he was worth, how carefully he kept everything cataloged. He used to joke about it. "Your dad probably files grocery receipts," he once said, laughing as he pulled out a binder labeled auto maintenance. 2015 to 2019. So I waited. I waited for him to ask something. Anything, a casual, "Did your dad have a will?" A neutral, "Have you heard from the estate lawyer yet?" Even a simple, "You doing okay with all the paperwork?" But no, nothing. He came by 2 days after serving me to get his things. Claimed he didn't want anything from the house, just clothes, laptop, toiletries. Packed in silence while I sat on the stairs and watched like a ghost tied to the banister. "You sure you don't need anything else?" I asked. He zipped his duffel. "I've got what I need." He didn't even glance at the office. Didn't ask about the key to the filing cabinet. Didn't walk past the study where my dad's documents were stacked in neat little rows on the desk. He just left, again. I stood in the kitchen afterward and turned in a slow circle, trying to make sense of what wasn't being said. Because that silence, it was too clean, too controlled. And Matt, the Matt I thought I knew, would have at least pretended to care. That night, I sat down with the will. I hadn't opened it yet, couldn't stomach it at first. The lawyer had emailed me the documents 2 days before, and I'd flagged them and walked away. Now I opened the PDF and stared at my father's digital signature. Everything went to me. The lawyer's voice was calm, too calm. "Your father left everything to you, Claire. No trusts, no division, no co-beneficiaries. It's all yours, the house, the accounts, his business shares." I blinked at the screen. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter, the lawyer's face pixelated by a bad connection, voice cutting in and out like fate didn't want me to hear this cleanly. "No stipulations?" I asked. "None. He amended the will 3 months ago, very straightforward, said he wanted to keep things simple for you." I didn't speak, not right away. My dad was meticulous. He didn't do anything simple. Every decision had layers, every layer had footnotes. The lawyer misread my silence. "I know it can feel overwhelming," she added, "but I've handled plenty of these. Your father was unusually decisive." That part made sense. He was decisive. He didn't waffle or second guess. But still nothing to Matt, not even a gesture, a watch, a letter, a mention. After all that time together, after the job offer, the dinners, the late-night poker games on the deck, my father hadn't left Matt a single line. I clicked through the files again. Slowly, looking for a footnote, an appendix, something, there was nothing. And Matt didn't ask, never asked, didn't message me, didn't call the lawyer, didn't send a single line to anyone in the family, not even a just checking in. But something else had changed. I noticed it when I passed his apartment building. The one he claimed was temporary, a holding place. There was a car in his parking spot I didn't recognize, something sleek and new, metallic gray with custom plates. 2 days later, when I met with the accountant to start sorting the business assets, he walked in wearing a watch I'd never seen before. It gleamed. He caught me looking. "Gift," he offered. "From who?" "Old friend." He smiled, no tension. No flicker, just like that he was flush with cash. He rented a place that didn't match the story, top-floor unit, oversized windows, the kind of lobby that smelled like eucalyptus and polished stone. The receptionist wore a blazer and heels, and when I told her I was here to drop something off for Matt, she didn't ask for ID. Just smiled and handed me a visitor's badge. I remember thinking, this is not a man who just walked out of a marriage and into financial free fall. He came down in a fitted sweater, designer I think, with sleeves pushed up just enough to show off that new watch again, rose gold bezel, dark leather strap. Not flashy, not gaudy, just expensive in that quiet, deliberate way. "You didn't have to come in," he murmured, taking the envelope from my hand. "Divorce paperwork. I hadn't signed it yet." I wanted to, I don't know, see his face. He didn't open it. I glanced over his shoulder. "Nice place." He shrugged, "Temporary." Didn't think they had temporary rentals with concierge service. He smiled, just enough to piss me off. "Friend deal. Same friend who gave you the car." He didn't blink. "Yeah. Must be a hell of a friend. Old connection, college guy, he owed me." There was something about the way he said it, not quite rehearsed, but careful. Like he'd measured the words before bringing them out. He leaned in then. Smelled faintly like that cologne my dad hated, citrus and musk. "You okay?" he asked. I wanted to punch him in the face. "Peachy," I replied. "You living your best life yet?" He laughed, not kindly. "Don't do that." I crossed my arms. "Do what?" "Act like you didn't see this coming. We've been dead for a while, Claire. You just didn't want to say it." He stepped back like that settled it, like that line erased 12 years. I stood there long enough to let the receptionist glance up twice, then I left. That night I went home, poured wine. Sat on the floor of my dad's study with a pen and notepad, trying to list out everything that felt wrong. My marriage, obviously. The sudden upgrade in Matt's life. The timing, the silence about the estate. The cash, the watch, the car, the apartment. The way he looked at me like I was a closed door. Then I remembered the safe. The safe was in the upstairs closet, behind a false panel Matt had installed himself 2 years ago. We didn't keep much in it. Some jewelry. Tax documents, our marriage license. Backup drives. It was the kind of safe people forget they have until something goes wrong, a break-in, a fire, a reason to prove you exist on paper. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Didn't need to, but something about the way Matt deflected all that money, the watch, the shrugging friend story made me itchy. Like my skin knew something I didn't yet. The code was still the same. My birthday. He never bothered to change it. It clicked open. The first thing I noticed, it was messier than usual. Matt was neat. Obsessively so. Files were always stacked in alphabetical order, corners aligned, labels typed. But now the folders were jammed in at weird angles. A bracelet box shoved behind a binder. Receipts curled instead of clipped. And then there was the folded newspaper. Tucked between an envelope labeled 2019 IRA and a blue velvet pouch with my grandmother's earrings, like it had just slipped in by accident. I pulled it out. It was the obituary section from the Sun Valley Chronicle, the issue from my father's funeral week. The page had been folded once, then again, creased perfectly to center one listing. James Wallace, beloved father, mentor, and husband. His photo stared up at me, the one we'd chosen for the program. He looked tired but sharp, proud, solid. Someone had circled his face in black ink, a thick, uneven ring. Too heavy to be casual, too deliberate to be anything else. My fingers started tingling. Then I saw the sticky note, tucked neatly inside the fold. Yellow, familiar, Matt's handwriting. 2 words, "It's done," and a date. 2 days before the funeral, I stared at the note until my eyes burned. "It's done." 2 words. Written in the same pen he used to label his gym containers and sign our Christmas cards. The loop in the T curled too high. The dot on the I was faint, like he pressed the pen too light. The date on it was even worse, not the day of the funeral, but 2 days before. Before we stood side by side in black, before he wept in front of my family. Before the ashes, the eulogy, the quiet candle-lit night where he held me like grief had swallowed him whole. 2 days before that. And he wrote that note. It didn't say, "He's gone." It didn't say, "So sorry." It didn't say anything that sounded like mourning. "It's done." I read it again, and again, hoping it would shift, morph, mean something else. But the words didn't move. They just stared back. I flipped the obituary over. Nothing on the back but a classified ad for used furniture and a church service schedule. I checked the rest of the safe. My hands weren't steady anymore. The jewelry was still there. So were the tax files, but some folders had been opened, rifled through, left in a hurry. One envelope was labeled Q4 Medical inside, a single sheet. My dad's hospice bill, dated just 2 weeks before he died. Matt had seen it, Probably printed it himself. He was the one managing most of my dad's appointments at the end. Said it was too much for me, that I needed to focus on spending time, not logistics. At the time, it felt like love. Now I wasn't so sure. I sat on the floor holding that stupid sticky note, and I felt something cold and ugly settle in my spine. Not grief, not confusion, premonition. Because that note didn't belong to a grieving son-in-law, it read like confirmation. There were other notes, tucked behind a manila folder marked car titles archive. I had to wedge my fingers between the safe wall and the edge of the file to get to them. 3 more sticky notes, stacked together, stuck to the corner of a printed email thread. The first one just said, "Reconfirm Thursday." The second, "Double-check her schedule." The third had a name on it. Brian. That stopped me cold. Brian was one of Matt's old friends, the kind of man who showed up at parties, made 2 inappropriate jokes, and disappeared with a drink in his hand before dessert. We never clicked. I used to call him Exit Strategy Brian, because Matt only called him when he needed an excuse to leave early. I peeled the sticky notes off slowly, heart jackhammering. Then I looked at the email thread beneath them. There were 4 emails, printed out, not even saved digitally. He'd taken the time to physically print them. The subject line on the first one read, "She'll get everything, I just have to wait." The date stamp, 4 months ago. It was from Matt to Brian. I read the first email 5 times. "Can't rush this, it's coming. He's already sick, it's just not official yet. Once it is, she'll get everything. No one else is named. I've seen the paperwork. I just have to wait and play the part." Brian's reply was shorter. "You sure it's clean, no blowback?" Matt replied, "Completely, all above board on paper, she won't see it coming." I couldn't breathe. She won't see it coming, she, me. The emails weren't about grief. They weren't about support. They were about timing, about money, about execution. I flipped the last page, Brian again, and after. Matt's reply chilled me to the bone. "That's when I move." My father got sick fast. 1 month he was biking 5 miles a day, tracking his blood pressure with that little leather-bound notebook he kept on the kitchen counter. The next month he was forgetting appointments, slurring certain words, sleeping more than he was awake. The official diagnosis came late. Stage 4, aggressive, terminal. The doctors used those words with a practiced calm, like they were reading off a script they'd rehearsed 100 times. My dad didn't flinch, just nodded and asked for the timeline. When they said 6 months, maybe less, he just murmured figures. But even then, something about it hadn't sat right with me. It wasn't just the diagnosis, it was the speed. One day he was forgetful. 2 weeks later, he couldn't stand without help. A month in, he barely recognized the nurse who visited every morning. Everyone said it was the cancer. "It happens like that sometimes," they explained. Fast spread. Especially at his age. I believed them. I had to. But now, with those emails in my hand and the sticky notes still burning a hole in my brain, I couldn't keep swallowing that story. I remembered the mornings Matt made his coffee with military precision, blending protein powder like he was training for a silent marathon. He always made Dad's meds too, always insisted. "It's easier for me to track it," he said. "You've got too much going on." And I let him count the pills, fill the dosette, manage the prescriptions. I was so busy crying in bathroom stalls and calling specialists that I let him take over. And he did, smoothly. Completely. He'd even gone to one of Dad's appointments without me, said he didn't want to bother me at work. I asked what the doctor said when he got home. Matt had shrugged. Nothing new. Just wait and keep him comfortable. Now I wasn't so sure he ever went to the appointment at all. I dug out the hospice binder that night, the one with all the medication logs. Found Matt's handwriting all over it. Neat rows, initials, dosages, times. He'd filled out every box like he was proud of it. I flipped to the week my father started having seizures. There was a new medication listed, one I didn't recognize, and no prescription slip attached. Matt was always managing his medications. It started as a kindness. My dad struggled to open pill bottles some days. His hands trembled, not from the illness at first, but from exhaustion. Matt stepped in naturally. Said it was no big deal. "Let me handle it," he murmured. "You just be his daughter." At the time, I was grateful. He took something off my plate, That was Matt's whole image, the capable husband, the helper. My aunts used to pull me aside and say, "You're lucky, Claire, not many men would take this on." I believed them. He'd portion the pills into that plastic organizer every Sunday night, color-coded, labeled with a Sharpie. He tracked when each dose was given, checked them off like a job well done. Said it gave him peace of mind. But I remembered something else now. The nurse, the hesitation in her voice. The day I came home and found her in the kitchen, holding one of the pill packets, frowning. She looked up at me, startled, then smiled too quickly. "Everything okay?" I'd asked. She nodded. "Oh, yes, just checking dosage. Your husband keeps meticulous records." I remember thinking that sounded more like a warning than a compliment. That medication I'd found in the binder, the unfamiliar one, wasn't listed in the hospice manual. I Googled it. Lorazepam. Anti-anxiety, sedative, can suppress breathing in high doses, can cause confusion, especially in the elderly. There was no doctor's name next to it in the chart, no initials in the administered by column either, just a scrawl of a checkmark. Different from all the others, I looked at the date it was first logged. It was the same week Dad stopped eating. The week he couldn't speak clearly. The week Matt started bringing him smoothies instead of meals. I went back to the drawer. Rummaged through the folders, the receipts, the pharmacy slips. Found one stapled to a Walgreens bag, Matt's name at the top. Prescription, lorazepam. Quantity, 90. Date, 3 days before Dad's final collapse. He never told me. The timeline didn't add up. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, email thread on one side, my father's hospice logs on the other. I wasn't a detective, I wasn't even trying to be one, but the dates lined up too neatly, too cleanly. Matt's first email to Brian, the one that said "it's coming," was sent 1 week before Dad was hospitalized for the last time. 3 days later, Matt started logging the lorazepam. 2 days after that, my father couldn't walk. And the night before we admitted him to hospice, Matt said something that I hadn't thought about until now, something small, offhand. We were sitting on the stairs. The air smelled like bleach and chicken broth. My father had vomited twice that day. I'd said, "He's slipping so fast." Matt nodded, didn't look at me. Sometimes the body just gives up. Now I wasn't so sure it was the body. I scrolled through the emails again. Each one now felt like a tick on a clock winding down. I just have to wait. No blowback. She won't see it coming. There was no affection in those lines. No grief, no hesitation. I went back through the hospice logs, looked at every entry, every note. My dad's condition declined in perfect rhythm with Matt's messages, like a plan unfolding in phases. Matt had been methodical, not sloppy, not fast. He didn't spike anything or make it obvious. He administered just enough, just slowly enough to look like nature was doing the work. But it wasn't nature. It was timing, strategy, control. The way he rationed information. The way he handled the funeral. The way he let me sob in his arms like a puppet grieving in his play. I remembered the eulogy again. The part where he choked up just before saying, "He gave me the best thing he ever made." And now I realized, that wasn't praise. That was closure. I talked to the lawyer. Not mine, my father's. The one he'd used for years, a woman named Dana who always wore stiff linen blouses and had a voice like wet gravel. She was discreet, thorough, and knew my father's estate inside and out. We met in her office. Neutral ground. She poured me water without asking, then sat across from me with her hands folded like she already knew this wouldn't be easy. "I need to know when my dad changed the will," I said. She didn't flinch, just unlocked a drawer and pulled out a folder. 3 months before his death, February 2nd. That was a full 6 weeks before the diagnosis. Before we knew what was coming, before the coughing started, before the memory lapses, before the weight loss, before the tumor on the scan. I stared at her. "He wasn't sick then," I said. Dana nodded slowly. "He didn't mention anything at the time." I hesitated. Who initiated the meeting? She paused, then turned the file toward me. Matt's name was on the intake form. Initiated by Matthew Reed. Purpose of visit. Simplify will, single beneficiary. Requested confidentiality. "Why would he do that?" I asked, mostly to myself. Dana was careful. "He said your father wanted everything streamlined." Said there'd been too much confusion the last time someone in the family passed. But my dad didn't call you. No, Matt did. She nodded, booked the appointment, brought your father in. I couldn't breathe. And my dad never followed up. He signed the revised will that day. No further changes. I pressed my palms into my thighs to stay grounded. Did he seem sick, off? Dana hesitated for the first time. Not sick, but tired. Distracted, he deferred to Matt on most things. Let him speak for him. I swallowed. Did that seem normal to you? She studied me, not cruelly. Just with the quiet sharpness of someone who'd seen too many families torn apart by money. I remember thinking he looked worn down, she finally said, and that your husband was doing most of the steering. I spoke to the nurse. Her name was Evelyn. She worked the afternoon shifts mostly, but sometimes stayed late when my dad couldn't sleep. Middle-aged, kind-eyed, always wore her ID badge clipped to her hip instead of her shirt. She and Matt had gotten along, or at least that's how it seemed then. I called her out of the blue. Told her I just needed to ask a few things. Closure, I said. It wasn't a lie exactly. We met at a coffee shop near the hospice center. She ordered chamomile tea, didn't sugarcoat her curiosity. I wasn't expecting to hear from you, she said gently. Is everything okay? I nodded, but my hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. I had the receipts in my bag, the prescription log, the emails, the sticky note, but I didn't take them out. Not yet. I've been going through my dad's things, I said, trying to understand the last few weeks. What happened? She nodded, waited. Did anything seem off to you? That's when it happened, just for a second. Her eyes flicked down. A breath caught in her throat. Tiny, almost imperceptible. What do you mean? She asked. I leaned in. You were there almost every day. You saw how fast he declined. Did anything seem strange? She hesitated, stirred her tea with the bag still in it. Your husband was very involved, she said finally. That's not what I asked. She glanced around, lowered her voice. He knew all the meds, kept notes, asked good questions. But sometimes he was too in control, would override instructions. Say the doctor told him otherwise. I felt a spike of heat climb my chest. Did you report that? No, he was always polite, firm but not hostile. And your father never objected. He couldn't, I snapped. He was drugged out of his mind. Evelyn didn't respond to that, just sipped her tea like she didn't want to be here anymore. Was there anything else? I asked. She hesitated again, then she said it. There was one night, maybe 5 days before Mr. Wallace passed, I noticed a discrepancy in the lorazepam dosage. It was higher than what we recorded. How much higher? Enough to sedate someone twice his weight. I stared at her. Did you confront him? I asked. He said the doctor approved it. I didn't have any reason to doubt him. But it bothered me. Why didn't you say anything? Her voice softened. Because by the time I questioned it, your father was already unconscious. I went to the police. I didn't bring a lawyer. Didn't bring anyone. Just a folder with the note, the printed emails, the pharmacy receipt, and the dosage logs. The kind of evidence that looks damning when laid out all at once, like a puzzle that clicks together with a final, horrible snap. The officer at the desk was young, polite. Didn't look at me like I was crazy, which I appreciated more than I expected. He took the folder, flipped through it slowly, then asked me to wait while he got someone from investigations. An hour later, I was sitting in a gray-walled room across from a detective named Rodriguez. Early 40s, sharp-eyed, wore plain clothes and didn't smile much. He laid the folder on the table between us. Didn't touch it. Start from the beginning, he said, so I did. I told him about the funeral, the sudden divorce. The car, the apartment, the new watch, the safe, the note, the emails, the nurse, everything. I kept my voice steady, didn't cry, didn't ramble. Rodriguez listened. No interruptions, no reactions. When I finished, he finally opened the folder. He read the sticky note twice, tilted it under the light. You sure this is his handwriting? Yes. He skimmed the emails, marked the pharmacy receipt with his pen. You said the prescription was filled by your husband, but administered to your father. Yes. Without documented authorization. Correct. And you have the hospice nurse's statement. She won't give it formally, I admitted, but she confirmed the discrepancy. He sat back, exhaled through his nose. Claire, he said slowly, this looks bad, I'm not going to lie to you. So what happens next? He closed the folder. We need a toxicology report. Evidence of poisoning, misadministration, something conclusive. I stared at him. He was cremated, I whispered. Rodriguez nodded. I figured. He rubbed a hand down his face, tired already. I believe something's off. But without physical evidence, it's not enough. The emails don't admit to anything explicitly. The note's suspicious, but it could be interpreted a dozen ways. And unless the nurse is willing to testify that your husband knowingly gave an improper dose. She's scared, I said. I don't blame her. He looked at me again. Longer this time, not unkindly. Keep digging. If you find anything else, anything, bring it to me. Then he handed me back the folder, just like that. Matt filed to freeze the assets. I got the notice 2 days after the meeting with Detective Rodriguez. A thick envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize, with words like interim injunction and temporary financial hold printed in clean, sterile font. He was going after the inheritance. Despite the divorce, despite walking out, despite saying we were done. He'd filed a claim under community property laws, arguing that because we were still legally married at the time of my father's death, he had a right to half of everything I'd just inherited. The house, the accounts, the business shares, everything. I read the document 3 times, each sentence more absurd than the last. He wanted half of my father's estate, the same estate he'd never asked about, never mentioned, never once showed concern for until now. I called my lawyer, Emily, a friend of a friend, sharp, brilliant, always had a pen in her hair like she could unsheath it as a weapon. She read the claim in silence, then muttered, "What the actual hell? Can he win?" I asked. "Not if I have anything to say about it." We filed a countermotion the next morning, challenged the asset freeze, argued that the estate was inherited, not marital property, that the divorce proceedings had already begun before distribution, that Matt had no legitimate claim. It became a war of paperwork. He didn't show up for the first hearing. Sent a junior associate. Coward's move. But the intention was clear: bleed me financially, stall the distribution, drag it out. I started liquidating minor assets just to pay legal fees. Matt, meanwhile, kept living like nothing was happening, still in the fancy apartment, still driving the new car, still silent. I knew what this was. Not about love, not about marriage, not even about grief. This was extraction. Leverage. One last attempt to cash in on what he'd already orchestrated. But he made one mistake. He underestimated how loud I could be when I had nothing left to lose. I released the evidence publicly. Anonymously, at first. I created a burner email account. Attached the emails between Matt and Brian, the sticky note, the pharmacy receipt, the updated will timestamp. I wrote a 2-paragraph summary, just enough to raise eyebrows without sounding hysterical. Then I sent it to a local journalist. Her name was Kira Ellison. She covered crime, politics, city corruption, real stories, not clickbait. I'd read her pieces for years, trusted her voice. She wasn't afraid to burn bridges, especially when they led to something rotten. I sent it at 3:14 a.m. subject line, possible inheritance scheme, confidential. She responded less than 6 hours later, need to speak. In person, today. We met in her office, glass walls, messy desk, recorder always running. She didn't ask who I was, she didn't need to, she read everything. Twice. Asked surgical questions. How long had I been married? Who prescribed the medications? Why was the will changed before the diagnosis? When was the cremation ordered? Then she asked the one thing I wasn't ready for. Are you prepared for what happens when this goes public? I nodded. He deserves it. The story ran 3 days later. Headline: Inheritance Scheme, Widow's Sudden Divorce Raises Questions After Father's Death. It wasn't a direct accusation, she was too smart for that, but it laid everything out. The timing, the email thread, the medication, the sticky note, the will, Matt's sudden wealth, my silence, the police's current non-investigation. It spread fast, the local subreddit blew up, then Facebook, then Twitter. The comments section turned into a battlefield. People arguing over evidence, morality, intent. Some thought I was grieving and delusional. Others called him a sociopath in a fitted sweater. By the weekend, 3 other journalists picked it up. One from a regional news site reached out to ask for an interview. I declined. I didn't need to say anything. The emails spoke louder than I ever could. Matt went silent. No interviews, no rebuttals, no social media activity. His LinkedIn disappeared within hours of the article going live. His office didn't list him anymore. The team section of the company website had been quietly updated, his bio gone, his photo replaced by a smiling intern. Then the real fallout started. Someone posted his apartment address online. Not me, I never would have, but someone figured it out. Internet sleuths were fast, vindictive, and surprisingly good at property records. A photo showed up the next morning. His sleek gray car, keyed from front to back. The windshield smashed in. Someone wrote poisoner in pink spray paint across the driver's side door. I didn't condone it, but I didn't feel bad either. The next week, a video made the rounds, grainy footage from inside his office building. A confrontation in the lobby, two men yelling. One of them was Matt. He looked thinner, frazzled. The caption read, "Caught him trying to sneak out the back. Guess he doesn't like being famous." The company released a statement 3 days later. Matthew Reed has officially resigned and is no longer affiliated with our organization. We take all allegations seriously. He vanished after that. No more sightings, no more updates. His phone number stopped working. His name bounced back on emails. The concierge at his building told someone he'd moved out suddenly. I started to wonder if he'd fled the state. If Brian, wherever he was, helped him disappear. Maybe they planned it from the start. Maybe Brian was the next step, the final exit strategy, but then the bank froze the joint accounts. One of his credit cards was declined at a gas station in Reno. I got an alert. He was still somewhere close, but he wasn't reaching out, not to me, not to anyone in my family. Even when my lawyer contacted his legal team, asked if they still intended to pursue the marital claim, the reply was brief. Mr. Reed is unavailable at this time. Unavailable, like he'd scheduled his own erasure. I scattered my father's ashes alone. No ceremony, no matching suits, no photos on easels. Just me, a quiet lake, and the wooden urn the funeral home gave me in a cloth bag that smelled like lavender and dust. It was the place he'd asked for. The lake behind the cabin he built with his bare hands 20 years ago. We used to fish here every summer. Sometimes just sat in silence, watching the water flatten out when the wind died. I parked at the edge of the gravel lot, let myself through the old wooden gate he never bothered to fix. The grass was longer now. The bench we used to sit on had rotted at the edges, but it still held my weight when I sat down. I opened the bag slowly. The urn was heavier than I remembered. I held it against my stomach like it might break if I loosened my grip. I didn't speak right away. Didn't cry either. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch around me like a second skin. Eventually, I stood, walked to the edge of the dock. The wood creaked under my feet, familiar and tired. I unscrewed the lid. The ashes looked like wet sand. Pale and soft, I let the wind move them. They curled out in spirals, caught by the breeze, lifted into the trees. Some fell into the lake and disappeared. Others clung to my fingers like he wasn't ready to go. I whispered, "I see it now." I'm sorry it took so long. The breeze picked up. It sounded like his laugh. I poured the rest of him into the wind. Watched the last of the ash scatter across the water, disappearing into the same place we used to skip stones and lose hours. Then I sat down, let the silence return. And for the first time since he died, since everything shattered, I didn't feel alone. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.